It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome into another episode of the Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. Alan, what's going on?
Not too much, man. Not too much. I thought you were going to go with another.
I decided to do that on a whim.
With another soap opera reference.
Bold in the Aiyuk.
Yeah, I was trying to see one Aiyuk to live. You know, I didn't know which way you were going. I didn't know.
I know, literally right before I pressed record, I said what I was trying to think of which one I said yesterday, and I was like, you know what, I got it. I'll just throw it in instead of afternoon in the name of the podcast. But Alan, we got to lead off the show just talking about if there is anything to update the people on in the Brandon Aiyuk situation. Been a pretty quiet day. I mean, yesterday was the day where it was like all the buzz because there was, reports saying that it was done. A verbal agreement in place was thrown out there. All these other things regarding it. Today been pretty quiet on that front.
Yeah. As I expected, I didn't get the sense that we were like imminently going to get this done yesterday. I do continue to feel optimism from the Steelers that they will eventually be able to get this trade done. I think what's happening right now is that the 49ers are trying to involve a third team, whether that's to be part of a 3-team trade or to flip draft picks from the Steelers to another team in exchange for a wide receiver. Obviously, that's a complicated process. They're going to talk to 30 other teams. That could take a while. And I don't think, we should expect it to get done right away. The good news from the Steelers end is my understanding is that the 49ers have not said no. It's more like, well, let me see if we can make this work with somebody else, then this is okay value for us. And that is a hurdle, a step forward that was made yesterday that I think is what got a lot of people excited. But that doesn't mean we're across the finish line yet. Certainly, and like I've said many times, until there's a press conference, none of the options are off the table. He could still end up back in San Francisco. He could end up traded somewhere else. Who knows? And it only takes one practice injury, and every team is out there practicing for this entire thing to get turned on its ear.
Yeah, Mike Garafolo shared a lot of the same sentiment that you just did on the Rich Eisen show today, especially in terms of trying to include a third team, San Fran, maybe looking at what they can do with some of that draft capital, getting a third team involved. But I started to think back, like, Alan, how common are 3-team NFL trades? Like, or are we talking even if it's 2 separate transactions in that way? Like, it just doesn't seem very common. And then you're going to see this other team probably view San Fran as a very desperate party in the situation if they know that if they feel like they have to get a receiver back in this deal. I don't know. Like, it just all seems kind of weird to me. I'm not questioning the optimism from the Steelers side that this is eventually going to get done. It's not common, in my opinion, the way that this is going to play out.
It certainly isn't. That's for sure. I was trying to rack my brain about how many 3-team NFL trades I can recall over the years, and I've certainly seen it happen, but it's not very. The Herschel Walker trade is kind of the one that you kind of go back to many, many years ago. I believe when the Rams traded for Eric Dickerson, I believe that was a 3-team trade as well, but they're pretty rare. Like, they don't happen very often. They're complicated. Like, we've talked a lot about the 49ers maybe preferring to see Aiyuk go to the American Conference, right? They don't want to trade him to, like, the Cowboys, right? And so this brings in another dimension. You have to find a third-party team that is acceptable to both other parties. I'm sure that the 49ers would love to get T. Higgins, right? But would the Steelers be okay with sending their draft picks to Cincinnati to make this work? I don't know. And so, like, there's all these moving parts where it gets complicated, and I think I'm not holding my breath about this thing getting done shortly. There is an entire month until the start of the season, and there's really no reason for the 49ers to be in a rush here. They should be hoping that as this is happening, somebody out there really important wide receiver gets hurt and opens up a new market for them. Like the 49ers are going to be watching every preseason game hoping there goes Tyreek Hill. Great. Now we can leverage Miami and see if they can make a better offer, or, like that. There goes, AJ Brown, like that. That's what the 49ers are hoping happens. So I don't know why they would rush to the finish line. And the Steelers, usually if you're in the Steelers position, the reason to make a deal move is they could say, well, we'll just go get somebody else. If you're not ready to make a deal, there's nobody else out there. Like I saw people talking about, maybe the Broncos could include Cortland Sutton. I'm like, if Cortland Sutton was available, the Steelers would have traded for him already a long time ago, and this we wouldn't even be here. So yeah, I mean, I think there's, I think San Francisco is gonna drag this out for a while.
Yeah, I agree. The other thing too, like you talked about these other suitors, of course, Aiyuk, the other part of this is him wanting to go there and sign an extension there. Like my concern, and this is coming from the fan perspective, obviously, so not asking you to weigh in from this perspective, is like, at what point is Washington eventually? I just keep waiting for Washington to become more part of this conversation than they have been. And that's kind of my fear with happening as the hours and days go by without a deal happening. But Indianapolis has lost Josh Downs. That's somewhere we don't know for the period of time, but he went down in practice. Would that be somewhere where Aiyuk would like to go to? Rondale Moore, who the Steelers see in their opener, Atlanta just lost him for the season. Is that somewhere where Brandon Aiyuk would be open to going and San Francisco would be open to dealing with them? I don't know. So I'm just, I'm curious to see how this whole thing plays out. Somebody did mention, and even you bringing it up there with San Francisco, not saying no, just kind of looking around league to see if they can facilitate this in a way that will also accommodate their need for a receiver as well, is encouraging. How much, if at all, this kind of just occurred to me, does the relationship between John Lynch and Mike Tomlin play into this as well? I don't know that they've done a ton of business together over the years, but obviously they have a relationship going back to Tampa.
There's a lot of respect there. I don't know that really means a lot. You wouldn't get this far if you didn't respect the other person. So, I mean, I think there's a good relationship between Tomlin and Lynch, and just in general between the Steelers and 49ers. The DeBartolo family is originally from Youngstown. I know that, you got Irish Catholics and Italian Catholics in close proximity. Like they, those guys, the Rooneys and the DeBartolos coming into the NFL, former owners of the Penguins, the DeBartolos are. So there's like a lot of ties there. There's a lot of connections that I think these two franchises, while both, I mean, honestly, among the premier in the NFL in terms of the way they do business, I think there's a good amount of mutual respect there. But I don't really know I don't know how much that plays into to talks like this.
We typically save. Do you have anything else regarding Aiyuk as we sit here right now?
No, that's pretty much all I got. So for shout out to the like random group DMs I keep getting added to, full of Steelers fans, just absolutely starving for knowledge about this.
Which, by the way, I saw you actually took time to like partake in one over the weekend. I was in Cleveland at SummerSlam, and I wasn't on my phone really, so like I get out of there afterwards, and I see I had a DM request, but like there were like 300 some messages in there, and I saw your name pop up as I was scrolling through there, and you were just like doing like a Q&A in this group DM, and I was like, what's going on right now? But shout out to those group DMs. I get added to them all the time. That's why I typically don't really partake in them. But Alan, we typically save the questions for last, but I want to dedicate the time that we have after this until the rest of the show to talking about this preseason game, what to look forward to, whether it's players or just position groups, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll answer this question right now. Jimbo33 Slice, this comes from YouTube.
And you're about to see why we had to get to this question.
This is it. Yeah, this is it. This is, if you want everybody watching or listening, take notes on Jimbo Slice's format here. Gents, love the show. Y'all always keep the energy and insight coming. Shout out to Alan, always giving such well thought out answers. Listen to this. Love Smitty's facilitation prowess. And when we get DB going deep into schematics. Was wondering if you all could get into the weeds on comp picks. How exactly do they work? How do they play into the calculus of what the Steelers can afford to give up for Aiyuk? And separate from that conversation, does dealing Dan Moore or James Daniels now get the Steelers more or less, you think, than they did as a comp pick?
Yeah. facilitation prowess needs to go in your resume now. I think, like, just like go ahead and put that in as a skill on LinkedIn. Like, just like what Jimbo Slice confirms facilitation prowess.
I see that you're applying to be a new anchor at ESPN. What do you think? What do you think skill wise you could bring to the table? Facilitation prowess.
There you go. Yeah, so the comp pick part of this argument is thus. If the 49ers lose Brandon Aiyuk through free agency, they will get a comp pick, making some assumptions. So basically the way comp picks work is the amount of salary that the player is signed for are put into a spectrum. The top of that spectrum, the best comp picks are third-round picks, and then they go all the way down through, like, undrafted free agents. And then the NFL has a specific number of comp picks they'll give out in a season. And so wherever you fall in that spectrum, like the top 50 or whatever, that's how many they're giving them. There's a cut line, then nobody gets any after that. So if the only thing that happens to the 49ers this offseason is they lose Brandon Aiyuk, he signs a huge contract, and they don't sign or gain any other free agents, they would get a third-round pick. Not this coming draft year, but in the following draft year. So this is going to happen. The free agent move would happen in March 2025. They would get it for the 2026 NFL draft. But every addition and subtraction cancels each other out, no matter how good it is, as long as it is enough to count towards the formula. So if the 49ers lose Brandon Aiyuk on a 4-year, $120 million contract, but then let's say they sign, I don't know, some random middle tier wide receiver, Khalif Raymond, to a 2-year, $10 million deal. That cancels out their pick. Even though Aiyuk here, Raymond here, one far better than the other, it's the total quantity first. And then, so you have to have basically a surplus of countable free agents lost compared to countable free agents gained. And then if you have that surplus, the amount of the contracts will determine how many and what level of comp pick you're able to get. So, yes, the 49ers would be in line to get a comp pick and a very high one for Brandon Aiyuk if he leaves, but they would then have to sort of structure their offseason around making sure that they're able to get it in terms of numbers of coming and going free agents. If you remember when the Baltimore Ravens signed Alejandro Villanueva in the middle of the summer, they actually waited like an extra week to do the deal because there's a deadline in the summer where they cut that off. And so people that are signed after the middle of the summer don't count anymore towards that. So the Ravens actually was just like, yeah, we're going to sign you, but we're going to wait until next week so that you don't count against our comp pick formula. Teams will do stuff like that to make sure they get them. As far as the Steelers, yes, if they lose any of their pending free agents, guys like Dan Moore, Pat Freiermuth, Najee Harris, who else was mentioned there? James Daniels, any of those guys would make the Steelers eligible as countable free agents if their contract expires, Cam Hayward, and they leave the Steelers and they go sign somewhere else. Even guys that aren't like top of the line players like Nate Herbig certainly could sign for a deal big enough to count. Someone like Dean Lowry theoretically could. He's on a 1-year deal. Landon Roberts absolutely could. And so, it's not as cut and dried as saying like, oh, we'll just let these guys go and then we'll get the comp picks. You can try to like maneuver into them if you know you're going to lose someone, but more often than not, the comp pick itself is not guaranteed to a level that it's sort of worth letting a player go just to get them. I think for the 49ers this offseason and this year, there's obviously a tremendous amount of value to them in having Brandon Aiyuk for this season where they are Super Bowl contenders. And then that's why, you could have him this year, try to win the Super Bowl, and then also get a comp pick. But the comp pick is sort of the and then also part of that arrangement, not the driving force as to why you would make that kind of move. Same thing with the Steelers. They're not going to trade Dan Moore or because they might get a comp pick for him later. That's not going to hurt them in that way. And of course, if you trade him, then he doesn't count to the formula at all. So it doesn't matter. But yeah, I think that's I hope I answered the question there.
Yeah, I think it's a good summation. I mean, we've had a conversation before on here about comp picks as well. I don't know if it was as in depth as that was right there, but like relatively similar conversation, kind of breaking it down the way that the formula works, who's eligible. That's what it was. Somebody was asking players that are eligible versus not eligible. So it was a little bit different specifically than this question. So, but yeah, good stuff. The other thing that I wanted to talk about on today's show, obviously the Steelers, I feel like it's kind of gotten lost in the Aiyuk shuffle, but the Steelers have a preseason game tomorrow that they're going to play with the Houston Texans coming to town for this game. And I wanted to talk about what you think are the players to watch, what the things are to watch. So maybe not also just specific players, but whether it's like guys that you know are in position battles on a 53-man roster, fighting for a spot, things of that nature. So like who jumps out to you right away? Who are you excited to watch, or who should fans be excited to watch, I should say?
I'm excited to watch someone who is not wearing a black and gold jersey. I'm just
there you go.
13th practice today, man. It was a drag. It was a pretty boring practice. It was mostly just a walkthrough, so that doesn't help. But yeah, I'm ready to see them play against somebody else. That's absolutely for sure. I'm sure some of these guys in this team are ready to hit somebody else too. They're pretty sick of one another, just like I'm sick of watching the same drills over and over again. In terms of guys that I really am watching in this game, I think I'll start with the defensive secondary. I think there are a number of young players in this defensive secondary that the Steelers are asking an awful lot about. And to me, that's Beanie Bishop, that's Corey Trice, Darius Rush, and Ryan Watts. Specifically, those four guys. I expect them to get a ton of playing time. This is a really good Houston, not just at the top, but really deep Houston wide receiver core. Davis Mills is certainly a capable backup that can get the ball where it needs to go and give you a good test. So even if CJ Stroud, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell are only in there for a couple series, I think for most of the game, you're going to see a very talented Houston passing offense in there. And I think it's a really good test. Like, the Steelers are very thin in terms of experience depth. Cam Sutton suspended for 8 games. There's a real chance that neither Graylin Arnold or Anthony Averett makes the 53-man roster. But in order to do that, they've got to feel pretty good about Corey Trice, Darius Rush, and Beanie Bishop and Ryan Watts being able to provide real depth for the secondary. What happens to the Steelers if Dante Jackson pulls his hamstring in week 1? What happens to the Steelers if DeMonte Casey gets suspended again, or if whatever? They don't have experienced backups in the secondary. And so I think this is a really good passing offense, both schematically and in terms of the talent level it's provided. And I think I'm really, really going to focus on those guys a lot in terms of the Steelers defense.
Yeah. I mean, that's where I would go right away too. I mentioned Ryan Watts yesterday. We've talked about how excited Corey Trice is for this game, and that was a guy that I was super high on coming into the draft last year. So I'm excited for him to finally see some game action. You could throw everybody in the secondary into that same boat. For me, where I'm having trouble, Alan, is like from an offensive standpoint, who should I be in your mind looking for? Like, who are you looking to see if their training camp will carry over to the preseason? Like, from a fan's perspective, if you could give us advice here, who we should be circling to watch? Who are some guys on the offensive side of the ball?
Well, I think of the offense, the big story is the offensive line, right? How much are we going to see Broderick Jones at left tackle and Troy Fautano at right tackle? I would assume an awful lot. And then how do they look there? How much does Zach Frazier play, and how does he look? Isaac Seumalo is not going to start. I expect we're going to see Spencer Anderson start the game at left guard, but you're probably also going to see Mason McCormick rotate in there. You could see a situation where you're going to have all, the whole offensive line be first and second year players here pretty early into this game. And so I think that's a unit that this isn't necessarily the world's best front seven in Houston, but I just want to see how they look in those first game reps. In those new positions, Broderick at left tackle, and then the first sort of NFL reps for Zach Frazier, Mason McCormick, and Troy Fautanu. Such a big part of this offense. We talked yesterday about reasons the Steelers may not be contenders. I think the fact that this offensive line is completely unproven is probably like the number 2 reason there. If they can go out there and prove themselves in a preseason game, I think that makes you feel a lot better about anything that you would see in the training camp setting.
Yeah, actually, now that you mentioned Broderick Jones, I saw a post earlier. I think that he was asked by somebody about, where he didn't know where he was going to play and he said, he's definitely seen more time at right tackle, and that obviously got Steelers Twitter up in arms because they want to see him at left tackle. People are having a hard time exactly understanding what the plan has been for Broderick Jones, because it ultimately seems like we're getting to a point where even if it's not like the beginning of this year, it's to be Broderick at left tackle and Troy Fautanu at right tackle, but people just want to see that now and can't figure out why that hasn't been taking place for the majority of training camp.
Yeah, and I think we explained that pretty well after my conversation on Sunday with Pat Meyer, that this is about putting Fautanu on the right path and letting him dictate the timeline. He's going to tell them when he's ready to go, and I think he's getting there. I think we're seeing sort of constant development in that regard, but it's not overnight, and they don't want to push him farther than he's ready to be pushed. And I think the big thing is there is just an underlying confidence that Broderick Jones can do it from the Steelers, that I don't think they're really worried about how much he does it in the preseason and training camp. I think they're very confident in Broderick Jones' abilities, and that if he's mostly right tackle all preseason and they ask him at the week 1 to go over left, they're not too worried about doing that.
Yeah. No, I mean, it makes sense. And after hearing Pat Meyer talk about it, I don't know if I can fully say that I'm on board with it, but I understand the process is what it is. And I certainly don't want to rush Troy Fautanu and put him in a bad spot there. I put this tweet out a while ago, I think before even training camp started, and I just want to circle back on it now as we start to get into preseason game action. But every year it seems like there's a preseason darling, like training camp and preseason darling that sticks out to people. Is there a guy on the roster right now that you feel like could be that? And it's typically a skill position guy. So my dart throw was Aaron Shamplin's going to light it up in the preseason games or something like that. But is there a guy that you think kind of fits the mold of what I'm talking about there?
Yeah, I do. I think there's a couple. The first one I'll say, Jonathan Ward, man, he's a good running back. I think he's gonna do really well. He's been very explosive. A couple 80-yarders over the last 2 days. I think he's really good, and I think he's a guy that you should watch out for. Jack Coletto. People are going to be very surprised at how much the Steelers are using a fullback. And they got this big lumberjack looking dude from Oregon with a mustache, and he looks like he's on came here on a time machine from 1977. And I think he's someone that people are really going to like once they get to see. So those two guys to me really stand out on that offense as people that are going to get people's attention when sort of the greater Steelers audience gets a hold of them.
Okay. Yeah, every year it seems like there's that guy, whether it's Tuzar Skipper, David Patterson, every year there's somebody that's a training camp and preseason standout in that regard. Yeah, I don't know. So it'll be interesting to see. Was there any other obviously not takeaways yet because we're talking about beforehand, but things on the surface to watch, maybe not necessarily players, but things to watch?
Yeah, obviously, I think we should be paying a lot of attention to the kickoff and what happens in that regard, both in terms of, personnel, who's back there returning, who's covering, who's blocking, but also strategy, tactics, whether, teams deciding to let it go or try to return it. Are they just going to run the ball, or are they going to try to, run a lateral or run a handoff or an end around or a throwback? Or, there's all kinds of stuff teams can try here. How aggressive are they going to get with it early? I'm very interested to watch that live and see it. From
that perspective, I don't know how it's going to go, but I want to see John Rice Plumlee in all facets.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a good bit of him. I'd expect him to work at least the fourth quarter, maybe more than that. And he's going to return some kicks too. He's been back there all week, so I think it's absolutely something that's going to happen.
How do you see it going from the linebacker group in terms of reps tomorrow?
I think you'll see no Patrick Queen at all. I think you'll see one series of Landon Roberts, and I think you'll see a whole bunch of Peyton Wilson, Mark Robinson, and then probably mix in some Dirty Red, but then Jacoby Windman and Easton Gibbs will be your kind of third team guys.
So I was going to ask about Easton Gibbs, for a guy that literally just got there, the expectation to turn around and immediately play in a game.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. There's no question, but that's the job. And he's he had a tough first day of practice, man. He was out there trying to cover Rodney Williams. It didn't go very well for him. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, I expect him to be out there a lot. They did get Kyron Johnson and Jeremiah Moon back this week. So I think you'll see those guys a lot. Highsmith's not going to practice. Watt's not going to practice. So you probably see like Nick Herbig and Jeremiah Moon start, I would assume. And there's only 4 or 5.
No Marcus Golden either.
He wasn't in practice today, so I don't know what's up with that. I would lean towards you're not going to see Marcus Golden. You will see DeMarvin Leal will probably play some defensive line and some linebacker, outside linebacker, just as he's been doing because there's just not enough guys. But yeah, I mean, I think you're going to see a lot of some of these players because it's going to be pretty short work for the early rep guys.
Probably should mention, what is he back for like his 4th time now? Jalen Elliott back with the team.
4th stint with the Steelers. Jalen Elliott back again. Notre Dame grad safety, brought back after Nate Metters, who I thought was having a really good camp, was waived with an injury designation.
Honestly,
hamstring injury.
If that didn't happen, if he didn't get hurt, Nate Metters might have been one of my guys.
Dude, Nate Metters, Tyler Murray, and David Perales are the 3 guys who have been hurt on this defense that I think all could certainly have been in that conversation. And Willington Prevalon, man, he's like
Sir Willington Prevalon. Yes,
I'll go over 1/2 sacks in this game for Sir Willington G. Prevalon III.
I was just saying, if it's either got to be Sir or a middle initial, I'm fine.
Esquire, maybe. How long did he go to college? Could we give him Esquire?
Just sticking in like with the position group stuff as well. Who was rolled out? Refresh my memory. Like, who did Tomlin say wasn't going to play at all?
Russell Wilson, Isaac Seumalo, Cam Hayward, Alex Highsmith, TJ Watt, Patrick Queen, Minkah Fitzpatrick.
Okay, so I was just asked about Minkah, like the safeties, because we've seen Deshaun Elliott banged up a little bit in practice recently as well. How do you think those reps are going to be divvied up?
Yeah, probably not very much for Deshaun Elliott. Probably a whole bunch of Devontae Casey, a whole bunch of Ryan Watts. Jalen Elliott will fill in and do a bunch, and then Cam Sutton has been mostly playing free safety since he just said they're trying to get me reps wherever. So I think you'll probably see a whole bunch of Cam Sutton at free safety just to try to fit in.
If he thought, the reason that I asked about that, I was wondering if we would see Killebrew at all in that because he really.
Yeah, I mean, he'll probably take some reps. He's not a real option to play there in a game, but
sure, right. I just wondered in a preseason game where you're just like looking to basically fill out snaps because of the way that the depth chart is. I don't know. Anything else from this game that you're looking for, we should be looking for?
Yeah, keep an eye on those Texans receivers, man. I mean, so many times we've seen over the years the Steelers sign somebody who played well against them in the preseason. Like that is like almost a trope for the Steelers, and there's going to be one of these wide receivers available, so go get them.
Well, so with this Aiyuk talk that we've talked about, would Houston make sense as the 3rd team to get involved from San Fran's side?
Certainly possible. Yes.
Okay. I mean, all I'm saying is they're going to be here tomorrow. Maybe the Steelers have a little bit of a conversation, help facilitate, hey, you guys should get on the phone with San Fran right now and see if we can make something work here. Because it'd be the Steelers draft picks that are draft pick that would ultimately be going to Houston. So
yeah, it's certainly possible that could be the fit.
I think it makes so much sense, but I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. Anything else, Alan?
I think that's it.
All right. You know the drill at this point. Tell the people they can find you.
At @Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, and TikTok. PGH Steelers Now is the site's account, SteelersNow.com. Get $10 off, promo code Allen10 for all the best stuff for myself, Derek Bell, Chris Ward, the whole rest of the Steelers Now team. Go read the words so I can get paid. Like, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications on YouTube so you don't miss anything on here on the YouTube channel. We'll have another Steelers Morning Rush tomorrow. We'll have another Steelers Afternoon Drive tomorrow. And then we'll have a preseason game.
And then we'll have a preseason game tomorrow. Allen 10 saves $10, not 10%, $10, but keep it on the down low. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell here. As Alan said, hit us in the comments with your thoughts on anything that we talked about, any questions for a future episode. If you are listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever your podcast from, be sure to leave us a 5-star review and subscribe over there. Hit us up on TikTok as well. Steelers Afternoon Drive, 90-second clips from the show. For Alan Saunders and myself, thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.